Hello, everyone. Digital strategy is paramount to all of us. And today we'll be focusing on a critical part of your digital landscape, very often undermanaged by digital leaders with major consequences. There are newly emerging risks and brand impacts related to your company domain and domain name system that you need to be aware of. We'll show you those risks with real-life examples, explain them, and give you a guide to assess your own company's exposure. We'll also share some best practices that you can follow to mitigate your risk and better protect your digital brand, including an orientation to a completely new naming convention for the global internet that hundreds of companies are now embracing. Let's face it, digital strategy is no longer something else that we do. It's more like everything we do. It defines our companies, our markets, and our competition. Paul Wilmot of McKinsey puts it very well. Our competitor set, and in our opinion, our entire business landscape is not what it used to be. And CMA members completely get it. CIBC was recently named an award winner for digital transformation. Rogers CEO Joe Natale, in a Globe and Mail interview, not only embraced digital strategy, but he announced his new chief digital officer and her role. And Dean Connor of Sun Life was named Canada's Outstanding CEO of the Year, in large part based on his leadership in digital innovation. So digital strategy is clearly a winning move for these companies. But what happens when digital goes disastrously wrong? The fact is that everything digital depends on the domain name system, and increasingly we're seeing brands hurt by domain-related events, most of them preventable. And here's just a sampling. Hackers redirected domain name servers of a major cryptocurrency and emptied user accounts of $400,000. Don't be tempted to dismiss a cryptocurrency event as an outlier. A major bank in Brazil got hacked so that their online banking redirected customers to fake lookalike sites that phished all their account information. Many companies forgetting to renew domains experienced critical digital operations either go dark, like Marketo and Sorensen Communications, or redirect their customers to malicious third parties, as in the case of Dell Computer. And many more of these cases like this go unreported. We know of 2 in Canada's own banking backyard in recent months. So what's happening and why? Failed domains can be just plain human error or administrative mess-ups, but catastrophic nevertheless. But the more esoteric hacking events are proliferating because malicious parties are specifically targeting domain and DNS weaknesses. Part of the problem is that companies tend to manage their domains and DNS in departmental silos that aren't connected. And the fact is, every audit we conduct on domains in companies and DNS discovers specific security gaps that the teams involved did not know about. And the business impacts can be severe, involving everything from customer fallout to financial loss, penalties, and legal woes. So it begs the question, why do these risks persist? And the answer is any of the above. It's lack of awareness, complacency, or the mistaken belief that it's under control. Everything about your digital operation rests on security and compliance, which we define as 3 specific areas. Access is all about who can get into your systems and how. Change management covers staff approvals, permissions, and procedures, the basic rules that govern your policy enforcement. Visibility tells you what was done, who did it, and when it happened. In short, real-time auditing and monitoring. So if your company is publicly traded, regulated, or just digitally dependent, things have changed for you in a big way. And for those in the audience today that operate in Europe, let's quickly take a look at the new EU General Data Protection Regulation, which is slated to come into effect May of this year. Had Dell or the Brazilian bank or that cryptocurrency company I mentioned, had they suffered their breaches in the European Union, post-May, the fines for them could have hit 20 million euros or 4% of their total revenue, whichever is the greater. So there is no doubt that our world is changing. Peter's now going to tell you what else is changing and what you can do about it.
Thanks a lot, Paul, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'd also like to thank the Canadian Marketing association for hosting this event. We do work in very interesting digital times. There is so much change going on, so many new technology and capabilities. The pace is amazing, it's confusing, but it's really exciting. But unfortunately, there are also a number of risks and exposures that are growing as well. So during this webinar, I'm going to ask you a few questions to help you self-assess. So here's the first one. Does it make sense that domains in the DNS are more or less managed the same way they were 20 years ago? Think about that. Think about what the internet looked like in the year 2000. It's obviously a very different world today. I want to start there and review digital complexity growth we see all around us. I think that'll help you connect the security and compliance risks that we see in domains in the DNS. It's 2018, times have changed, and so must your brand digital identity strategy and management practices. So let's have a look at complexity growth, the risks and challenges. When we think about digital evolution and complexity growth since 2000, it's amazing and it's just accelerating. The top-level domain space has exploded. ICANN launched the program in 2012 and has introduced 1,300 new top-level domains. Generics like .club, .homes, .autos, .bank, .insurance, and geographic names like .nyc, .london, .paris, and .quebec, and hundreds of brands who apply to own their own space, like Google, Amazon, Apple, and Rogers here at home. It's a massive expansion of the public internet, and more are coming. Then what about social and mobile? Well, social is where people hang out and interact. These are third-party spaces that brands do not control, but spend considerable resources. And mobile, well, we're all just obsessed. And then there's content. Content has doubled and it's exploding, and the pace just seems to be accelerating. Through it all, the consumer trust is low. There are so many threats out there. And brand teams, they take actions to protect the company and consumers, but it's becoming increasingly more difficult and costly with many challenges such as those listed here. Companies largely manage domains the same way I did 10 to 20 years ago. And while the internet and consumer is completely different, that doesn't make any sense to me. And solving the strategic and technical shift is why I founded Authentic Web. As consumers, we have to ask, do we trust the internet? We surf the net wanting to trust brands, hoping that Symantec or McAfee have our back. We engage in social, we use our phones. We hope the links don't take us to bad places. We try to be smart, but we know we're exposed. So the answer is no, we do not trust the internet, and that is the correct attitude. Then how can we trust a digital brand? We consumers trust brands to keep our information safe, and we give that information away a lot. If a brand betrays that trust, we as consumers will punish that brand. So what is the digital brand? Let's think about it from the consumer's point of view and how we all interact on a daily basis. We as consumers live in digital. That includes everything we do. We consume services, information, we buy stuff, we do stuff. Digital has entered every aspect of our lives, and it is here where we engage with brands. Unless, of course, you go camping and leave the hardware at home, but that's a rare pleasure. Here's a punchline, and perhaps not that well understood by most. Every digital brand experience you offer consumers is dependent upon and runs on the domain name system. We often think about domains and the DNS as old technologies. It is, but also a fact that the DNS is the very bedrock of the internet and therefore critical to manage well. Lose control of a domain setting and poof, your customers get fooled by very clever, nefarious actors. So let's think about a brand. Let's look at a successful digital brand who owns hundreds or even thousands of domain names. Great-West Life, for example. They own a portfolio of about 1,000 domain names to operate their digital business. First, they own greatwestlife.com. That's the corporate brand. That's the flagship. Hundreds of services will hang off this domain. And then there's GreatWestSucks.com. Clearly a brand protection, keeping the domain out of bad hands. Watermark Tower is part of their commercial real estate business, and CanadaLife.com is a sub-brand targeting a specific market segment with services. These are just a few examples. Many domains and more subdomains are likely redirecting traffic to the wrong destinations, or frankly nowhere, perhaps to untended servers or IP addresses that the brand no longer owns. So if we think about other businesses, successful brands, they own a lot of domain names, registered, acquired over the years for lots of good reasons since the late 1990s. Trademarks, products, programs, different acquisitions that might have taken place, and events. As discussed, business is digital, and digital is the domain name system. When taken for granted, bad things happen. And as Paul pointed out, even what we think of as very sophisticated technical organizations who thought they had it under control or maybe didn't pay enough attention were compromised, and it happens all the time. To help you understand how the DNS underpins your digital footprint, let's zoom in technically just for a minute. Here is a 60-second discussion. If you need it, I expect many of you on the call may be technical, others less so I'll try to find the middle ground. Here we have one domain, one registrar, one DNS provider with name servers, but it's in the DNS on what are called resource records that together make up what is called the zone file. In each domain zone file, there are many resource records, dozens, hundreds, and in some cases even thousands. They are the technical settings that direct traffic and content, enabling content and service delivery to customers. They're also in a constant state of change. These are your product splash pages, your video services, transaction engines, campaign pages, microsites, mail servers, network connections, web redirections, application content feeds, social destinations, etc. The zone files of your domains together comprise your digital brand. One domain's not so bad, but as the portfolio increases to even 100 or more, things start to get mysterious, painful, and risks increase. So let's say you own 500 or 1,000 domains, which most successful digital organizations do. It looks like this. You may have one or more registrars, partially due to vendor switches, IT preferences, evolution, and commonly due to mergers and acquisitions. It's not uncommon for a large organization to have 5 or 10 or more registrars active. Some have consolidated, and this is a good first step. Then there is the DNS, the managed DNS services. This is where the action happens, and all organizations we see have let this slide over the years. Why? Because as Paul pointed out, it's messy, and it's not that well understood in many organizations. The DNS is your digital footprint. So if you have 15 to 25 records per domain name, which is very common, that means you have 15 to 25,000 endpoints live on the internet. Many of these are untended, unknown, or simply dead ends on a server side, but live on the DNS. This is a challenge. What are they? Who has control? How are they secured? Think about all the new digital initiatives turned up every week, month, quarter, and year. Do they all get turned down? Not a chance, though written policy somewhere says they're supposed to. But it's not easy. Visibility enforcement is difficult. Your teams generally do their best, but they also get overworked, they forget, they make mistakes, they do not understand, or don't bother, or even more concerning, leave live connections on the internet. And who knows why. So if we think about that and understand the technical relationship to your digital brand, we're going to zoom out again. When we think about domains, we think about the website or email address. This is what we call the visible web. Below the surface is where the action happens, and it's invisible to most, but not the bad guys. This is where you have exposures and where the bad guys play. They see everything and hunt down network weaknesses and set their target. And it's getting easier. There's even a new service industry that has emerged on the dark web. You can buy a DDoS attack for $50 an hour, complete with service level agreements, tech support, and money back guarantees. So let's have a look and see what's going on inside the enterprise. We find it very similar across all companies we work with. It used to be easy. One domain, one registrar, one DNS service. It was typically a C-level with an IT member to set it up. Since then, it has grown to be extremely complex. Hundreds of domains, thousands of domains, lots of registrars, DNS services, and it's not uncommon to see dozens of legacy DNS services live. The driver here is that digital domains touch almost everyone in the modern digital business, and that's why there are so many stakeholders. Every part of the business has an interest in domain acquisition and domain management. It has become a Gordian knot of interests, and for them, it's frankly not a lot of fun. So how do these people feel about domains? What's their sentiment? What's their working experience? Well, it starts with the business owner, who usually says, domains drive me nuts. I don't know what we own, and it just seems to cost me money. On the compliance and risk side, they manage it by email, forms, process, Excel. They do not have fully integrated systems to address security and compliance, and rarely have audit capabilities to understand what's changed in historical terms. On the legal side, complexity and IP costs are simply increasing. On the marketing side, the process is slow to follow, and the current and lack of current and historical information makes decision-making very difficult. Finance looks at the costs, and it just seems to increasingly grow, and it's very difficult to allocate these costs across the enterprise. For security leaders, they know they set the security policies, but enforcement is another task. That's difficult. And for the IT folks that run everything, they serve the business teams. They know they need to clean up the zone files from the past, but it's difficult, and they know they're exposed. So let's talk about silos a little bit. Paul mentioned it earlier. What does that mean? Well, it refers to both stakeholder and operational ownership. Let's think about the ownership and the systems that run them. It's dependent upon people to do the right thing, know what to do, to close loops and loopholes, and that's a big risk. Here's the process today, managed by people inside the organization. Somebody needs to get a domain. They need to change a domain. So they enter it into a system, maybe ticketing system, email, or forms. And then from that system, somebody else takes that information and enters it into one of their registrar systems. And then from there, somebody else has to take that information and enter it into the managed DNS system and set up the zone file. Those systems are typically not connected. And then on the other side of it, you need to understand what's going on in the business. So there's analytics to review. And then that information needs to get back entered into these systems. On the security policy side, if it's enforced, it needs to get entered back into the system to make edits and changes. And on zone reviews that are periodically done, that are very resource intensive, any changes that need to happen have to go back into those systems. Then, of course, there's the dreaded Excel that comes around once a quarter or so, where people are supposed to review that file and decide which domains they want to keep and which domains they want to let go. So think about all those human touch points, the information that needs to get entered into other systems by people inside the organizations who are all different teams and in different operating entities. Over the years, people have changed. Preferences and services have changed, different approaches, and critically, institutional knowledge is lost. Who really has the history? Who really knows the condition of the network? It is owned and managed in bits and pieces around the company. That means it's unowned, and that's the problem. Some people own the DNS controls, others own the domain decisions, others own administration. Complicating that, it's split up between business entities and departments. It's a challenging problem. So to boil this all down, to help you understand your own brand condition, I have some more questions. If you take away one action out of this session today, it's this one. Find the true answers to these three questions. The first, do you have a unified tamper-proof system to manage domains in the DNS? Second, Can you prove that that system enforces security policies and change management? And third, is the system integrated with registrar and managed DNS services? Very few companies have this locked down end-to-end across the enterprise because it really is an emerging issue that's exploding more as we go forward. That's why we see some of the most digitally successful and technically astute organizations appear in the news. What do you do about it? How do you fix this? We can start you off in the right direction with some recommendation. Bottom line resides with executive leadership prioritization to address the risk. Once that is decided, it actually can be resolved rather quickly by applying some new strategies, practices, and control system technologies built for the current and future times. First, you need a baseline. So here's a very simple self-assessment questionnaire that you can have a look at. We'll take a look at just a couple. So first of all, who has access to these systems? Do you share logins? Are those systems tamper-proof? Can you prove that you have compliance controls in place? And third, do you have visibility into the zone files for analytics and monitoring? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and therefore you can't improve the performance. Secondly, that review will give a sense of your condition. And as Paul reviewed before, 3 areas to lock down your network are access, change management, and visibility. You need to equip your stakeholder teams with tools to manage the increasing complex digital landscape. It's really simple in many ways. Domain registration, is it automated, secure? Can you report it? Change management, is it controlled? Can you audit it? And is it efficient for team members? And third, can you measure it? If you can measure it, you can improve it. So that, more or less, is what we wanted to share with you in a briefing around domains and security in portfolios as they exist today. Now we're going to introduce a paradigm shift happening right now that's going to change your world completely over the next few years. Recall the earlier discussion on complexity and how ICANN is expanding the top-level domain space. Many of these are generic and geographics. Some may be useful to help you communicate messages and programs, but the big change are brand registries or brand top-level domains. They are game-changing. These are proprietary namespaces that you can control. Only you, the brand, can register and set up digital experience that are controlled, trusted, secure, and it's actually a new digital platform. Think of it as a blank canvas for digital reinvention. Some of the biggest companies in the world have already applied in round one. In Canada, we have Rogers and Shaw that applied. They have yet to activate, but surely leadership is going to move soon. Over time, my view is that every major organization and aspiring brand will eventually own their own space for lots of good reasons around security, control, authenticity, and innovation. We cannot go into all that today, but I'd be glad to give you a session on that if you wanted to reach out. It's pretty interesting. Larry Page gave a presentation a few years ago. He talked about when he walked into a room at Google with the team that was planning to apply. He asked them what TLDs they were planning to get. And they told him. They said Google, .YouTube, .Chrome, and .Gmail. And he said, are you guys crazy? The internet is changing. Google has to be a part of that. Google applied for 101 new top-level domains. Amazon applied for 76. So clearly Google and Amazon get it. TLDs and brand TLDs are going to change the internet. So who applied? 550 brands applied in round one from across many verticals. Take the financial services industry. Companies like JP Morgan, Amex, Visa, Barclays, BNP Paribas all applied. We don't normally think of big financial services companies as innovators, but when it comes to security and trust, those are the lifeblood brand characteristics for them, and as a result, they are the first movers. But other brands are waking up to this fact. Right now, we are seeing brands set up different use cases and deploying their brand name spaces. It is slow because it takes time to execute digital transformation in big organizations, but it's happening. Last quarter alone, we saw an 82% increase in the number of brand registry websites launched. So when is round two? So no one's been able to apply since 2012. But now, after several years of really good volunteer work, the next round is getting closer. 2019 is possible, but if I had to place a bet, I would say we will see the next round in 2020. And industry experts believe that brands and geographic top-level domains will be the largest participants. Here's another smart guy, Bill Gates. He talks about change. He says, we always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years, but underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. So his message is, don't be lulled into inaction. The world is constantly changing around us, and then suddenly it's different. You either evolve with that, or you get left behind. In my view, brand registries is the future, and I'm not alone in that view. So when you think about what you're doing in your business and what your priorities are, when you think about 2018 and 2019 plan, domain and DNS modernization and related strategy is directly related to most top priorities for business. It's a security and compliance issue you need to address in a more complicated universe. There's a strategic imperative to continue to innovate your digital brand to better serve your customers. There's always a need to improve operating efficiency, and which will allow you to reduce your total cost of ownership. A couple closing questions for you on this. When it comes to domain and DNS management and best practices, you have to ask yourself, are you equipped to address the risk today? And when we think about the future brand TLD paradigm shift, are you ready for that future? Have you prepared yourselves? Have the discussions happened internally? I'm going to close on a summary and just review this. Business is digital. Everything runs on the DNS. And bad things are happening with more frequency all the time. So every business needs to look at this and lock it down. Modernization and best practices address these security and compliance risks. And the digital paradigm shift is really the future and what you need to think about as you're starting to plan out the next 1 to 2 years ahead of you in digital. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today and interest in this critical area. For many years, it's been operated in a legacy practice. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have if you want to reach out, and we'd welcome a few right now if anybody has any.
Thank you. The first question today is, what are the most common or serious problems you can uncover in your audits?
That's a great question. Well, I guess there are two ways to look at that. On the security side, one of the biggest things that challenges organizations are the number of services that people have active. This makes it really difficult for team members inside that organization to operate and be effective. It's frustrating for teams and painful. I guess on the settings side, it's the lack of SPF. SPF is it's a sending policy framework for email. So this if it's not set up, it allows bad guys to send spoofed emails out to your customers all day long. The other one might be DNSSEC, where this ensures that there isn't cache poisoning. On the opportunity side, I guess, I think there's just a lot of opportunity to improve. Properly resolving domains to relevant content is really an easy one. The ability to reduce costs. If you see data, you can decide which domains you should keep and which domains you should let go. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Our second question, can domains and DNS affect our SEO?
Oh, that's a really good one. There's always a lot of debate around this one, but I really think it's simple. The search engines out there, our prime directive is simple. They need to deliver the best result. So if you clean up your domains and all your subdomains and make sure that they resolve to key spots, where it's relevant content, that really is an easy win. Cleaning up all those unresolving ones, will give you better search value. It all, of course, does depend on where you're starting from. But think about it as low-hanging fruit of good housekeeping, and that can be significant. On the brand domain side, I really think this is game-changing. If you set up your domains on your .brand, it's authentic, it's authoritative, it's controlled by the brand. And if you engage with good, valuable contents and services, search will see that you're the best result for that query, and they'll land people there. Just think about how easy it would be. 4KTV.Rogers or VibeTV.Bell. Just do it .Nike. It just makes sense, and it's intuitive. It's a good question.
Great. And our last question is, how much will it cost for a company to get its own brand domain?
Yeah, that's the one that no one really knows. It's another good one. Well, the true number is still uncertain. ICANN will be announcing the application costs when they open the next application window. To give you a context of that, the application fee just to apply in round one was $185,000. So it's not a small price tag. And there are a number of other costs to apply and operate. I think there's one thing I think I know, though, is that it will be less in the next round. I think considerably less. Everything from the application fee, the cost of processing and setup. And what that's going to do is increase the demand in the second round. I guess I can also tell you that, the way companies currently operate with hundreds or thousands of domain names, it's very expensive, and it's very expensive to protect your brand as well. So there's a very significant cost efficiency benefit and scalability benefit, as well as a protection benefit if you own it. There really is a clear ROI. So to answer the question, I can't today. I think it'll be less, but we'll have to wait and see what ICANN puts out.
Great, thank you. And that wraps up today's webinar. Thank you very much to our presenters, Paul and Peter at Authentic Web. And thank you to everyone who joined us today.
Have a great day, everyone.